Welcome to another episode of Advocacy at Work podcast. I am your host, Tim McDonald, and today I am joined by Jessica Cella. How you doing, Jessica?
Hi, good to see you, Tim. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you agreed to be my guest today. I saw you on LinkedIn after I saw a post about you winning the Woman of the Year award. So you want to tell us a little bit of that to get started? and that might jump us right into what got you involved in advocacy and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I was honored. I was nominated and I was chosen as the California Senate District 40 Woman of the Year. I was recently in Sacramento to receive that award from Brian Jones in San Diego. So that was super exciting. I wasn't expecting that. I think it's really great that they do that and they honor women and they honor small businesses and that type of stuff as well. But to be honored for the work that I've been doing in the San Diego area specifically was really cool, and I think it validates some of the important work that I'm doing, which was really awesome.
Yeah. So tell us, what got you started with advocacy and then we can kind of go from there about some of the things about advocacy. But first, I'd like to just hear how you got involved with advocacy.
Yeah, we all have a story, right, that motivates us to spend our our spare time and energy and resources, right, to give back to something that we care about. And it started for me on January 10th of 2019. My youngest son, I have three boys. My youngest son was diagnosed with primary adrenal insufficiency here in San Diego at Rady Children's Hospital. We were very lucky to be at a large institution. Rady Children's is one of the top institutions for children across the country, so we were very thankful for that. We had a wonderful endocrinologist, Dr. Marinkovic, who I'm lucky enough to work with now and do advocacy stuff together. He was diagnosed in January of 2019, and we had no idea what adrenal insufficiency was. I had never heard of it before. I didn't know anyone who had the condition. And leaving the hospital, the one thing that I always say that will never leave us is, they come to your bedside and tell you that your son has been diagnosed with a rare condition, which obviously makes your stop right there when they say rare condition. And then after that, they basically said, if he were to go into an adrenal crisis, which at the time I had no idea what that was either. If your son goes into an adrenal crisis, unfortunately in San Diego County, they are unable to give his patient carried medication, which is a specialty steroid called Solucortef, and they do not carry any of the steroids, on any of the rigs across San Diego County. And I think that feeling stayed with me, and just feeling like, oh my gosh, my son just got diagnosed with a rare condition and we are really on our own. I just felt like if you envision Hawaii, right? I felt like my husband and I standing on Hawaii, and it's like, oh my gosh, we have nobody else to call. There's nobody else coming, right? And so I think that immense pressure, obviously knowledge is power is what I think, and we use that for sure to make sure that we were advocating for not only our own son, but going back and doing some research on the condition, what it was, signs and symptoms of this particular condition, and what we should be doing at home to manage this condition. And obviously this adrenal crisis that I had no idea about, learning what an adrenal crisis is and making sure that we have this Solucortef injection ready at all times in every corner of our house and, car and emergency kit and all the things ready to go, because it can be a life-threatening condition. And so when he was 8 years old, that's a lot of pressure on a family, right? To feel like you've got to know so much about this condition that nobody else knows about, but you have to be an expert. So that was kind of day one for us. And, since then, I've really dove into the community and, helped in a lot of different ways. Education is a big gap for us. So I've been doing a lot of education, going back to your Woman of the Year. Part of that was a project that I just completed in January in San Diego County. Myself and 6 other endocrinologists across the country participated in educating 1,100 of their paramedics in San Diego County on adrenal insufficiency and what they should be doing if they come to a call that is a adrenal insufficiency call, making sure that they know how to give the Solucortef injection. In San Diego County, they're able to give our patient carried medications. Thank you, San Diego. And also myself and the endocrinologist were able to work with the County of San Diego, and we will be putting in a brand new protocol. I say we, like I work for the city, but the city will be putting in a a new protocol that will allow for patients carried medications to be administered for children ages 0 through 13. So that was a huge leap for us. We're very excited about that. Protocols are very hard to put into place. And so we're really excited about that to be out on July 1st. That will be live July 1st, 2026 in San Diego County.
That is amazing. Not to go too far in depth on this, but can you just explain a little bit in like layman's terms what this condition is and what can happen from it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start by saying to manage it day to day, it's very complex, right? But in an emergency situation, it's very simple. So that's what I tell people. I manage the hard part. I ask you to do the easy part. Hopefully we make a great team. So adrenal insufficiency has several different types. My son has primary. So I'll talk specifically about primary adrenal insufficiency. Primary means that your adrenal glands don't work at all. We say like, rest in peace, they're gone. They no longer operate at all. And so your body doesn't make cortisol on its own. And so in order to stay alive, you have to replicate that cortisol and aldosterone in your body. And so every day, 3 times a day, he takes steroids. He takes hydrocortisone 3 times a day, in addition to fludrocortisone, which is a salt pill. And that mimics the body's cortisol that you and I have on our own. So when we go into a scary situation, or if a gunman, right, were to burst through your door, you and I have that fight or flight, right? So our body has that stress response, and our body will respond to that stress. Unfortunately, these patients, they don't have that. And so when there is stress on the body, whether that be a broken bone or an illness, or, the flu is one of our nemesis, of course. And so if you can't keep your medication down, that's an emergency situation. And especially when you get sick, a lot of patients look like they're drunk, unfortunately. And so, you have to get more hydrocortisone, whether that be orally or an intramuscular injection in an emergency situation. So kind of in layman's terms, it's like I said, it's a very complicated condition, but in layman's terms, that's kind of, a little bit quick 101.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I didn't know anything about it, so I'm glad you explained it. I'm sure there's others listening that are going to say the same thing, so I really appreciate you sharing. One thing I just need to ask is, because it does separate, advocates from just caregivers and patients, is, you said that you just started educating yourself right away. What was kind of that moment, or, what inside of you kind of drove you to take this from learning for yourself to want to educate others?
Yeah. I think for us, I had no idea at the time how lucky we were, how blessed we were, whichever word you'd like to use. Like I said, being in a large metropolitan area with one of the top children's hospitals, with one of the top endocrinologists across the country, I had no idea what a blessing that was until I went to a conference with adrenal insufficiency patients. And I think there were about 225 people there. I'm very confident that I talked to at least 200 of them personally. And, part of it was learning from other people, right? What was their experience? How long had they had it? How, when were they diagnosed? How were they diagnosed? It was mind blowing for me to hear that for most people, it took anywhere from 3 to 5 years on average. And they have received horrible care at either their, hospital or with their endocrinologist. There were a lot more horror stories than there were success stories. And I realized at that moment that we actually had a success story. Obviously, as hard as it was that my son was diagnosed with a rare condition, we had a lot of things that went right. And I think there's a part of me, right, that feels a little bit guilty about that. And I want to make sure that I lessen the burden on other caregivers, on other people who are in this situation. And I want to make sure that I give back to this community and honestly have someone there by their side to guide them that I didn't have. I think it would have been nice to have somebody to call or text or whatever. And that came eventually, once you start, getting into the community and talking to people. But at the beginning, again, I go back to the picture of, the island, right, of Hawaii, and just feeling like we were all alone. And there was, again, like, there's nobody else coming. Like, it was us, So I think that really led me to my advocacy and trying to give back to other patients so that they didn't feel alone.
Yeah. And, I've been wanting to say this, but I wanted to wait till we got through these things first is, when you were telling your story originally, one thing that really stuck out to me is I think so many of us look like we need to make a big change, right? Like we need to
Yeah.
go, like you see the Capitol in the back of my background here, right? And I go to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
You talked about making change in your neighborhood, in the city and the county where you live. And I think that's just so important for people to understand. And
Yeah.
I just would love if you could just expand on like the feeling of the impact that you can actually see and feel happening right in your backyard instead of like me going to Washington and year after year after year and not seeing
Yeah.
results, knowing and hoping that it's going to happen eventually, but not like,
Yeah.
happening,
Yeah.
like within a year.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things originally that after the first year of diagnosis, I realized was a big gap in our community was our emergency kits. Our emergency kits, they're actually very simple. There's not too many things that need to be in it. But it just seemed to me that it was crazy that there were a lot of people who didn't know what an emergency kit should look like, what should be in it. Where do I get those resources, right? We have needles, and a lot of people have issues getting the needles. And it's hard because the Solu-Cortef injection that we have is useless if you don't have the needles. And so that was one of the big things early on, even not knowing everything about this condition after my son had only been diagnosed a year. I said to myself, like to your point, Tim, like I can't save the world. I can't save everybody, right? But I'm going to carve out this little piece of a gap that I've identified that I think I can give back to the community in this small way, right? And so I think trying to take on something that maybe is rudimentary for some people, but also can be very important for newly diagnosed patients, right? I mean, again, I always say if you don't have an emergency kit and you're in an emergency, that's a life-threatening situation and somebody could lose their life. So it is, a small piece, but it can also be a big piece of the pie, right? So I would just encourage people to just start small, like you said, like in your local community, and just do something, maybe do a meetup with local people within your community to do a roundtable, like how were you diagnosed? Who are some of your doctors and who are some of your contacts locally, right? I think starting small is always a great way to get involved. And then obviously, Tim, you and I, right? We've been to Capitol Hill and we've been to, Sacramento and all the things. And those are great. But at the same time, to your point, Tim, they can be very frustrating. There's a lot of red tape involved. Feeling your movement is hard at times when you are on that big scale and that big level. And I think some of the smaller wins, right, that keep us going are really at the patient grassroots level. When I get messages from families that I helped, 5 years ago that say, Jessica, we still use the emergency kit that you helped us create 5 years ago. Thank you so much. Or for instance, one mom reached out to me and said, my son went into an adrenal crisis and we were prepared because of you and because of the training that you've done. And so it's those little things, when you hear from the community specifically, right? That, to be honest, I think probably power me more so than standing on Capitol Hill advocating or getting Woman of the Year. And I mean, those are great things, right? But at the same time, I think it's the grassroots effort and working with the patients and the families one-on-one that really, I think, drives me at the end of the day.
I love that. And I'm like almost thinking to myself, I'm like, just feeling the same thing. It's like, just talking with or hearing from one patient that, you've made an impact with, for me is just like the drive that, like I said, the frustration that I get from going year after year, it just keeps me going back each year though, right? Is just hearing those little stories are the little wins. And I think it's such an important point to remind people is like, like you said, you just start small. It doesn't, you don't change the world, just start small. It's so important to think that. So yeah. So as you look at when you first started in advocacy and where you are today, what have been some of the changes over that time? And are there any moments that you can say that you kind of shifted a little bit from what you were doing compared to what you're doing today?
Yeah. I think those are both really good questions. I think the landscape has changed in some ways since my son was diagnosed in 2019. One of the probably the big changes is, originally we only had one pharmaceutical company involved, and that was Pfizer. And now we have several, which has been a good thing, right? More therapies is always a good thing, always options for patients. And in addition to that, right, it can also be a resource for patients. A lot of times those pharmaceutical companies will partner with people like myself to make sure that they understand, what the community needs are, make sure that they're getting education out there, and, have a great partnership there that can really help the community. So I think that's something that we didn't absolutely have 6 years ago. And so I think as an advocate, I welcome that to the table. And I'm excited to work with those partners to see, how we can work together and get the resources out there to the community. There's only about three nonprofits in our space, and they're very much grassroots. They run on about $150,000 a year outside of one of the larger ones, and so resources are scarce, and so it's really tough to move the needle when you don't have a lot of those resources. And so I think that was when things kind of shifted a little bit, is when the pharmaceutical companies kind of came into the picture and were able to help some of those nonprofits from a resource standpoint, and help with some of that, take the burden off of our community from that standpoint.
That's amazing. So, and I don't want to get too far off the advocacy topic, but I love asking some just personal questions. I kind of call them my lightning round, but I'll start like with real simple ones, hopefully, and then move into like a little bit more thought-provoking ones. But
Okay, great.
so what is your favorite color?
Oh, my favorite color is pink, which is why I wore this today. I love pink. It's my favorite color. It makes me happy.
Nice. Is there a color for your son's condition? Like, I mean, I
Yes.
know with colorectal cancer, we got blue, but I didn't know if
Yes.
he has one too.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually going to give you like a virtual high five, Tim, because ours is actually blue, and it's the exact blue that's in that picture.
Perfect.
Yeah. So
And what is your favorite band or musician?
I don't know. I don't know that I have a favorite band or musician. I listen to a lot of different types of music, so I don't know that I have I like country music a lot, so, but I'm not really, one person or one type or genre. I kind of try to like a lot of different types. So,
Sounds good. And what is one place you've always wanted to visit but haven't yet?
ooh, that's a good question. Niagara Falls is a big one for me. I want to go to Niagara Falls. So I think that's on our bucket list at some point. We've got kids at home, but eventually when we're empty nesters, I'm sure my husband and I will make it up there.
It is beautiful. I'm sure you've heard this. Stay on the Canadian side.
Yes, I have heard that. Yep. And Canada is gorgeous. I've been up there a couple times, so I'm looking forward to going back there as well.
Yeah. And last question of this is, what is one thing that most people don't know about you?
Oh, that's probably a good question. Um, I think if I were to get a little bit personal, I think one thing people probably don't know about me is I was raised by a single mom. And she struggled with drugs and alcohol. And I think another thing that drives me is not having the resources when I was younger. If I had adrenal insufficiency, my mom didn't have a college degree, and she didn't have the resources to send me to a Rady Children's or have the top endocrinologist. And I think having a lack of those resources and probably the involvement at home, I think has really driven me as well, because I always tell my son, I don't actually advocate for my son. I think he's got great resources here. You know what I mean? My husband and I do a great job. I don't worry too much about him, but I do make sure that I advocate for children and families and patients who don't have that luxury that my family has. And like I said, growing up, that I didn't have. So that's probably something a little bit personal that most people probably don't know about me.
No, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And what is, if you were to imagine one big thing that you'd like to see changed in advocacy, with, for your son and other people with his condition,
Yeah.
Resources are no object. You got all the money, everything you need.
Yeah.
What would you like to see happen?
It's funny you asked this, Tim. Actually, I call this my magic wand list. And I always dream big. And yes, I absolutely have a magic wand list. And I always say that, when the big investors call me, right, to donate their time and money to our community, I will have them ready. But yeah, so my magic wand list is long, but if I had to just choose one off the top of my head, EMS and protocols, and having them be able to give our medication and or have a protocol in place for adrenal insufficiency and be able to give one of their steroids, which would be dexamethasone or solumedrol. If I could wave a magic wand and have that education across the entire country, and the majority of paramedics at least having heard the word adrenal insufficiency, and have EMS agencies be able to respond to those emergencies in one way or the other. Unfortunately, right now, there's a lot of areas that are transport only, and that's how we're losing patients, is that they're just being transported, and they're losing their life in transport. So if I could have my magic wand, and make that happen in one foul swoop, that would be fantastic. So.
Well, I love that. I love it. And I'm just thinking, because I know, especially in my world of colorectal cancer, I know some of the challenges that come up when you live in rural areas. And,
Oh, yeah.
Like you were mentioning earlier about being fortunate that you're in a major metropolitan
Yes.
area. And I can just
Yeah.
imagine, like, you don't have as many resources there. So if something happened and your paramedic came, that would be a life-saving opportunity for you. So
Yeah,
I can just see how
absolutely.
important that would be across the country, everywhere. Just before we sign off, how can people learn more about you, get in touch with you, whatever you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. So my LinkedIn profile is pretty active. I try to, engage people that way. I've been known to, cold DM a lot of people, just introducing myself and, letting them know what I'm doing and see if it was something they'd be interested in working with. It works out pretty well for me, actually, most of the time. So that's been great. So you can find me on LinkedIn under Jessica Cella. My email address is jessicacella0721@gmail. You can find me there as well. And I love networking. I always say that, that's kind of my superpower. And I think, really has escalated my advocacy efforts because of that. And so, yeah, I love talking to people about this condition, educating others, and seeing honestly how their skills can help our small community. So I'm always thankful to people who are not affected, who join the cause. And I'm sure you can relate to that too, Tim.
Absolutely. And, I'm not bashful about reaching out on LinkedIn either, because that's how we connected.
Yeah, you're right. That is how we connected. Yes, absolutely. And you have to, right? As an advocate, that's what you have to do. You have to put yourself out there, even if you get 20 no's, if you get that one yes, right? And you can connect with that one person and make a difference with that one person. That's what it's all about.
I love that. And that's a perfect way for us to finish up. So thank you so much for joining us, Jessica.
Yes. Thank you for having me, Tim. I really appreciate it.